Hi, I'm Reeza Thomson. Today we will talk about resentment and how it affects our lives. I would also like to share some effective methods that can help reduce sensitivity, anxiety, and aggression sometimes associated with the feeling of resentment. Let's start by understanding what this emotion really is. Resentment is a destructive state for human beings, and when we feel resentment, it can display in various forms of behavior like anger, hatred, irritation, suspicion, self-pity, or judgment. Resentment is a complex emotional state that arises in response to actions or inactions of another person. And it's also perceived as unfair or hurtful. It can also create a significant distance even between the people who are very close. And most often, resentment is a reaction to disappointment, injustice, or a mismatch between expectations and reality. When a person feels resentful, they believe that their interests or dignity have been ignored, betrayed, or rejected. And we expect certain behavior usually from other people. And if we don't receive what we expected, we feel like we've been let down. Essentially, resentment is a combination of disappointment, pain, and sometimes anger. It can be triggered by various situations ranging from trivial things like someone's words to significant things like betrayal by a close person. Resentment is fueled by negative thoughts about how we perceive ourselves, other people, and the whole world. And usually it comes across like everything is so unfair. This keeps us trapped, reliving the pain repeatedly. For example, imagine a person whose partner forgot about their wedding anniversary or their birthday. And you can probably imagine how disappointing this could be, because if you expected their attention but received silence instead, despite the value of your relationship, you harbor resentment. Also, betrayal and disloyal behavior would make people feel somewhat bitter, which essentially is a state of resentment. Resentment can also form negative attitudes, projections, and transfers. For instance, resentment towards one person can actually shape a mindset that you unconsciously apply to other people as well, to other relationships. And resentment is a fundamental factor in the development of neurosis. For people with neurotic tendencies, the two dominant negative emotions are resentment and humiliation, with resentment often playing a leading role. Every unresolved grievance or internal issue adds more stress, and if multiple resentments accumulate, they can loop endlessly in your mind with thoughts like, why did this happen to me? Or what did I do to deserve this? Not all people develop resentment in the same way. And just like our physical bodies having the so-called genetic build, our psyche also has genetic predisposition program. There are several parameters in psyche genetics which predetermine some of our aptitudes, and one of them is called neuroticism. Some children are born with higher levels of neuroticism, which makes them more sensitive to external factors. And you may have noticed how some children born in the same family, to the same parents, living in the same house, can actually have different levels of sensitivity to their environment. This doesn't mean that this is a set in stone parameter, as the environment influences children too. Someone who is more sensitive than others may develop more heightened neurotic tendencies. So as adults, they're more prone to get resentful, angry, and more sensitive to what goes on in their lives. And by the way, this by all means is not a set in stone situation. It all can be improved in therapy. Having neurotic tendencies is not a life sentence. It all can be worked with, so the person can achieve a steady and consistent emotional, comfortable life and lead a happy life without being triggered by everything around about them. Resentment essentially is an unresolved situation from the past that a person doesn't try to resolve. It's a memory of the suffering caused by someone's actions or inactions. In order to address resentment, we should work with our inner self, definitely not by trying to change the person who caused it. Changing others is beyond our control, and the cause of this destructive feeling is our interpretation of the issue. Resentment arises from what we think about the problem or what we think about what happened. So we must work on ourselves and our thoughts, because our thoughts is what basically interpreted what happened. In some cases, the reaction to unfair treatment can persist for years, even a lifetime. This happens when resentment becomes ingrained in one's inner world and the whole world becomes unfair and everybody around you is unfair. That often stems from betrayal or other deep wounds from the past. The past should not be a burden of problems. It should be a resource for growth. It should be something like going to school and learning lessons. Experiences are neither good or bad. They're all lessons to learn. And the lesson of resentment is to learn how to let it go. So how does resentment develop? Resentment doesn't actually exist in animal kingdom. For example, wolves don't hold grudges against tigers. So for example, if they had a fight, they move on. Resentment is a uniquely human emotion. Even young children exhibit it. For example, when they throw tantrums, they cry. And resentment in children arises when the world doesn't meet their expectations. When they, for example, don't get a toy that they wanted or they don't get the ice cream that they asked for, they tend to throw tantrums. Children quickly learn to manipulate with resentment. For example, they can pout or cry and often receive attention or a solution in their favor. If parents fail to address these manipulations, this behavior gets reinforced and pretty much enabled. In adults, this childish behavior persists as well, because obviously they didn't learn it when they were children. In each instance of adults' resentment is an expression of the inner child. For example, you expected your friend to invite you to their birthday party, but they didn't. So you feel hurt because your expectations were not met. And instead of acknowledging that the issues lie with your own expectations, you end up harboring resentment towards your friend. Resentment always involves dissatisfaction with life, not actually meeting your personal expectations, which is a destructive state of mind. There are several types of resentment. Resentment can vary in intensity and depth, and we can try and break that down now. For example, manipulative resentment. And what that means is, this is the simplest form, like a child's behavior. You pout or refuse to talk, waiting for others to come and run after you, or basically come and solve your problems. And many adults use this strategy unconsciously because it's driven basically by their inner child. So we're talking about, for example, silent treatment as behavior. Number 2, minor resentments. These are small fleeting irritations like, for example, when your boss promised you an exciting project, but ended up basically assigning it to someone else. Or when the weather isn't ideal during your vacation, you end up being a bit resentful. Number 3, deep-rooted resentments. And these ones actually often span generations, like feuds between Romeo and Juliet's families. You might know the story. So the cause of the resentment may no longer be remembered, but the animosity persists. Number 4 is global resentment. This resentment is toward the whole world. It's often rooted in childhood dissatisfaction with the parents. Another type is hereditary resentment. For example, a divorced couple with children, when the mother is resentful and shares her thoughts and emotions of the resentment with her child, the child grows up with resentment towards her father as well. And that basically goes unconsciously. The mother could be quite angry with the ex-husband and full of hatred, and unconsciously she passes that down to her child as well. The father, for example, wouldn't even have a chance to explain to their child what happened. Maybe it was a very unbearable marriage for him, but the daughter or the son, for example, wouldn't even have that thought in their mind. So forgiving them would be quite difficult for the young person growing up, because their conclusions would have been purely based on what their mother told them. The best way to handle resentment is to let go of it. I know it's very difficult. It's important to acknowledge your feelings, accept that it's okay to feel anger or resentment because you were hurt. Emotions are neutral. They are not inherently good or bad. We need to go by facts. Number one, make a conscious choice. Decide whether to hold on to resentment or let go of it. Holding on keeps you stuck in stress, while letting go offers you freedom. Number two, release unrealistic expectations. Many resentments stem from unmet expectations, and people will never be able to be perfect around us. Accept that life and people and situations don't exist in order to just fulfill our desires. Number three, identify emotional blocks. Resentment often resides in the body as a tension somewhere. Find a quiet space, close your eyes, and locate where the resentment is hiding in your body. Sometimes you can actually feel it in one part of your body, maybe in your chest. Number four, forgiveness. Forgiveness for yourself. It actually doesn't mean that you need to forget and allow other people to hurt you again. It means choosing to free yourself from the emotional weight, because we forgive other people in order to let go, so we don't live in hatred and in resentment. A lot of people often ask a popular question: why do loved ones hurt us the most? Well, our loved ones are actually the closest mirrors of our own inner world. They show us what's happening within us by their own energy when we communicate with them. So they unknowingly highlight our vulnerabilities and teach us where we need to grow, which means we need to understand what we need to work out within ourselves. By shifting the focus from blame game to self-reflection, we can stop wasting energy on blame game because it's quite draining, and we would rather actually focus on how we can improve our relationships, how we can improve our own lives. It all starts with us, and each person needs to understand that it all starts with themselves by asking themselves questions like, what did I expect? For example, if I fell out with somebody, what did I expect? And did that person know about my expectations? And were my expectations fair? And was it that person's responsibility to actually meet my expectations and do what I wanted them to do? And genuinely, if everybody asks those questions and honestly answer those questions to themselves, they probably sometimes would see how absurd some of those expectations were. We all need to be in check with our expectations, and there is always a way out. Emotions are natural, and feeling them is quite normal for all human beings. Resentment, like any emotion, can be processed in a constructive way, so it can actually be let go. I can understand why difficult it is for a lot of people to do it on their own. Resentment must be released, so your past should actually fuel your growth. Like all the lessons you learned in the past should help you instead of weighing you down. Our thoughts determine our emotions, and working with our mindset, therefore, helps you develop techniques to overcome resentment and any other pain and negative emotions. Remember that the worst choice always is to stay stuck in resentment without addressing it. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. I'm Reeza Thomson, and I'm a psychologist. Feel free to share your thoughts on this subject in the comments below. And if you need any psychological help, my contact details can be found on my website and Instagram or YouTube accounts. Thank you for tuning in. See you in the next video.